listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with The Briefing.
Somebody, anybody, everybody scream!
Could you imagine a world without TikTok?
Brother,
Oh my God! What is that?
My money don't jiggle jiggle, it folds.
But in the club, we all fam.
Very demure, very mindful.
M to the B, it's M to the B, it's M to the B.
No viral memes or sounds.
Bored in the house and I'm in the house bored.
And no TikTok dances. Well, on the 19th of January, TikTok will be banned in the US unless someone buys it from its China-based parent company, ByteDance. The law was signed by President Joe Biden back in April 2023, but it took years to get across the line. And it all started with Trump.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok.
And just last week, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments over the law, which didn't go well for TikTok. The justices appeared likely to uphold the ban, throwing some tough questions over the relevance of the argument that the law violates the First Amendment. And to top it off, over the weekend, thousands of people have been signing up to Red Note, which is very similar to TikTok. It's a Chinese social media platform, and it's already got millions of users, making the app the #1 most downloaded app in the App Store. And even though the app is only in Chinese, American users don't care. Cam Wilson is the writer of the Australian daily tech newsletter, The Sizzle, and Associate Editor of Crikey. Cam, is TikTok about to die?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure it's going to die anytime soon, but it might be delivered a pretty tough blow. So this has now been 4 years in the making from when Donald Trump first tried to ban TikTok and kind of gave up. Or if you want to draw the timeline back from when Joe Biden and the previous Congress decided to pass a law saying that TikTok had to either sell its American operations or face being banned. But either way, wherever you want to draw the line from, at the moment, TikTok is staring down by this time next week, having a restriction on them, meaning that they pretty much won't be able to pick up any new American users, which is going to be a real problem for them.
So what is your understanding of the ban? What would it look like? Would the app just stop working on people's phones if you're living in America?
Yeah, so the way that the ban works is the law itself says that essentially like app stores can't, stock it. I guess that's the physical equivalent. They can't have the TikTok app on it anymore. So, for example, if you're someone who already has TikTok on your phone, this won't affect you insofar as it's not going to be deleted off your phone tomorrow. But you won't be able to get updates through the app either. So as time goes on, it'll become increasingly clunky and kind of hard to deal with. And that would be obviously to people in the US. But also on social media platforms, of course, they always deal with, having the network effects. Even a restriction like this, which means that, if you lose your phone, if you get a new phone, you can't download TikTok anymore. That means that, of course, you wouldn't be able to access the app anymore. You can also still, if you really wanted to, if you're a bit of a sicko, go on the desktop site for it. But obviously, TikTok is primarily a mobile app.
Okay, so if I'm living in America, I've got the app on my phone, the ban happens, it's still on my phone, I can just use it normally until it starts to kind of dysfunction in a way from having no updates. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, more or less. I think there's still some unanswered questions about some things to do with where the data is stored. But for all intents and purposes, people who already have TikTok on their phone very likely will continue to be able to use it unaffected. That being said, you will see, of course, even little things like your little brother accidentally deletes it off your phone. All of a sudden, you won't be able to access it. It kind of makes me wonder whether there's going to become I think you've seen this in other apps. I remember with, this is so long ago, this is dating me. There was that crazy game that was super popular called Flappy Bird. And all of a sudden, the guy who created it was like, I don't want this to exist anymore. So he did the same thing. He pulled it off all the app stores. And all of a sudden, you were seeing people sell their phones being like, used phone on eBay has the game installed. I wonder if we'll see people selling, TikTok pre-installed phones for people who are desperate to get their hit of the short video platform.
Yeah, that would be really funny. And I remember that too. So it's okay. You're not showing your age too much.
Two geriatric millennials.
Yeah. Okay. So what would the ban look like then for Aussies, us living outside of the US? Well, it's not going to affect us, right?
The ban itself shouldn't. it's, I mean, unless Australia follows suit, which there's no kind of indication that it will, I guess you will see creators, so people who are on those platforms, start to migrate. Imagine if you have a TikTok account now and you lose your phone or whatever, all of a sudden it's very hard to access that. And so, whether literally because they can't access it or knowing that, how insecure it is, they start to move to other platforms like Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, which are two essentially very, very similar services that are on other platforms that, of course, won't be banned under this. I wonder if you'll actually see those other platforms kind of continue to bloom like they have been growing. They kind of came after TikTok Reels, that essentially copies of them. Perhaps they will end up being a more vibrant online space. And so maybe, as a flow-on effect of this is even though a lot of people still have, TikTok on their phone and can still use it, you see more and more energy put by creators, the people who are professionals into these other platforms because they're not worried about what's going to happen. But no, really, when the law comes into effect on the 19th, which is when TikTok has to either sell itself or essentially, or its US operations, or cop a ban, I don't think that anything will happen here in Australia.
So you mentioned before Trump and how he was for the ban, now he's against the ban. Does the US government really care about privacy and our data? Or is it more that, big influential private companies like Meta just want to own it? How much of this do you think is Trump cozying up with Mark Zuckerberg?
Big question. Does the American government care about data privacy? So the kind of leveled reasons by the US government for this ban are kind of two things on national security grounds. The first one is this idea that the Chinese government could access the data through TikTok that would allow them to essentially, people claim, build a kind of dirt file on future politicians, spies who are on TikTok now. And the second argument is more to do with the kind of algorithmic power of TikTok. For people not super familiar, like when you go on it, the videos that are shown to you are mostly chosen for you. It's barely even affected by the people you follow. So, the application uses very opaque data it infers from how you use the app. So because this algorithm is so opaque, because it's very hard to see, what decisions are going to, what videos a user is shown, the idea is that we have no idea, and in fact it has been alleged by many people, that TikTok could be putting their finger on the scales to show, Chinese propaganda, to create anti-US or anti-other countries' content as a way of kind of, a soft power. Now, I should mention on both these reasons, this idea of the kind of data that TikTok would have on its users and this kind of propaganda thing. Our data now is, I don't want to be fatalist, I don't want to be nihilistic and say it's out there, but the data that TikTok is gaining on users is very similar to a lot of data that, is pretty much out there for anyone to buy, particularly governments. So, this idea that the Chinese government has set it up just to do this, to know, which cat videos you've been watching, I think is not super compelling. And the other thing, I understand why some people are apprehensive about it. And, someone put to me, imagine if the Chinese government right now was going to go and buy the New York Times, roughly the same, the kind of the biggest company in its field. Do you reckon that the US government would allow that? And I was like, no. And that's exactly what this is like. So while there has not been any compelling evidence and really any public evidence that this has actually happened, you can see why people from the US are kind of a bit worried about this, essentially this app that's on, millions of US people's phone that has no real oversight on the content that they're showing them and could change at any point, and it'd be very, very hard to tell from the outside.
So can Trump stop the ban?
By himself, no, I don't think. So it was a law passed by Congress, which has been appealed kind of to the Supreme Court at the moment. There was a hearing, a kind of very quick hearing on Friday with oral arguments. But the sense that we kind of got from what the justices were saying was that essentially, while TikTok, ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, is saying this is a violation of First Amendment of free speech. You can't just ban speech based on the kind of speech it is. That even includes there actually are legal precedents for upholding the right to share propaganda. The law itself is kind of it's been made on national security grounds, but ultimately it's about ownership of this company. And so while it is called a TikTok ban, it's actually the law is actually a TikTok divestment or ban. They're saying sell from your Chinese owners, or, and I should say that the company is actually a Singaporean company, but of course highly influenced and by China, or be banned. And so because that's a law that's been passed by Congress, assuming the Supreme Court doesn't step in, which it seems like it won't, Trump also doesn't have the veto over it because it's already been passed. We're really relying on Congress to kind of pass a law repealing that. That being said, because Trump actually owns like the levers of power, he could make sure that a law like this, based on how he directs, for example, the Justice Department, is actually enforced. That being said, that's a very precarious answer. So the short answer is if this law passes, there's not much Trump can do without the support of Congress.
Speaking of ownership with the app, what do you make of the reporting that Elon Musk might buy it? Is that legitimate or bullshit?
I mean, with him, it's so hard to tell, right? When you're the world's richest man who very clearly has what I would call poor impulse control, I imagine you can't really rule anything out. The thing about TikTok so far has been they have said, we're not selling. We don't consider this fair and we're not going to sell. So although there was some reporting saying that apparently they were talking, it's very, very hard to know how legitimate that reporting is. It wouldn't rule anything out, but we should look at the precedent of India, which did ban TikTok 1 or 2 years ago. And TikTok just copped it. They didn't sell it anyone. Not that I think it was a divestment thing, but they just kind of abided by it. So perhaps TikTok goes, we don't want to set this precedent. We don't want other countries to ban us or to force us to sell. We want to own our product and we're not going to be cowed by this. So yeah, I mean, I think, impossible to know. Elon Musk has a lot of money and, there's crazy things have happened. But at the moment, TikTok has kind of kept the line that we don't want to sell.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair enough. Why would you want to sell something that is making so much money and has so much influence in the world? It's really a bit of a tug of war. So I can see that ban kind of going forward more that you speak to me. Now, we talked about some of the privacy and data stuff. A lot of the rhetoric I've been seeing online is people joking about it. They're joking about, oh, I'm going to move to China, or they're saying they're making these videos willingly giving all their data and all their privacy, everything to the government in China. And they're like, take my data, you just give me TikTok, and all of these kind of really unserious videos that people are making. There's over 170 million US users on TikTok. Where will they all go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. My guess would be many of them will stay on TikTok to start. And as you kind of see the deterioration, as we mentioned before, as people's phones break, they replace them, that kind of stuff. I think, what we saw happen in India was that the competitors, I think YouTube Reels, did really well. So I would expect that a large portion of people will be kind of scooped up by those major ones. TikTok, or ByteDance, I should say, the company that owns TikTok, has another app called Lemonade. I don't know, actually never said that word out loud, but which is a kind of Instagram competitor, and they have been trying to push people towards that without a huge lot of success. There's also this other Chinese-owned very similar app called Red Note, which apparently has gotten a lot of people downloading it recently. But I think we should probably just those are kind of buzzy things that, it's easy to all of a sudden get a app into the top charts because it's buzzy. But realistically, the big players, Google, who owns YouTube, and Meta, which owns Instagram, I would imagine would be the winners of this because they already, in most cases, have apps installed on people's phones that already do this and work essentially the same.
I want to jump back to the Chinese app Red Note that you just mentioned there. Over the weekend, it's jumped to the top spot in download apps on the App Store with people jumping onto the app. It's very similar to TikTok. Can you tell us a little bit about this app? Why do you think people are choosing that app?
I mean, I think it's pretty much just a reaction, right? You say we can't use the Chinese app. Well, then we'll find one that's even more clearly linked to China. And obviously works very similarly. I mean, yeah, so it has had a kind of a burst of popularity, but, my sense not to be a killjoy that while maybe some people have gone over there for a bit of a laugh and also because it does work very similar. The fact is that most people already have YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels on their phone and are probably kind of familiar with it. One of the things that I actually think stops people from jumping from platform to platform is that, if I'm sure, Helen, you have TikTok, I have TikTok, your algorithm gets to know you well and it knows your interests. And then you go over to one of the other platforms and you're it kind of showed me some weird stuff and things I'm not really into. It doesn't always feel the same. It's kind of going from wearing a comfy, well-worn sweater to new clothes that haven't been washed. But I think I imagine that most people will end up using those ones they already have. So yeah, that this Chinese Red Note is kind of popular, but I imagine it's kind of just a bit of a fad.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that with the difference right now for me with TikTok and then Instagram Reels. One of them knows my algorithm really well and the other doesn't. So I'll just automatically go back to the one that I feel like, oh, this is the content I want. But let's just say this ban happens, everything goes ahead. And as you've described, US-based creators will slowly stop using the TikTok app or might lose it if they have to get a new phone or anything like that. How do you think this will change the app's experience for other users around the world? Because the US pretty much dominates Western culture. So if Americans aren't so much on it, will the app survive or will it just stop being such a pop culture kind of juggernaut where we get all our memes or we get all our sayings from or the viral TikTok sounds?
That's a good question. I mean, this is the real opportunity for Australia to seize our rightful place as like the cultural superpower without America in the way. It's hard to tell because I mean, I think like, like TikTok has like so many viral memes and sayings, as you said, have come out of it. But, Instagram Reels in particular has an enormous amount of users, but like I can't really think of a single Instagram Reel like born meme or like saying that I like know. And maybe there are some that I have no idea about. But like, it is funny how they're like one, despite having, I imagine, like in a ballpark of similar users, one just seems to like obviously punch so much above the rest. And I don't know if that's just because of like whether it has better technology or whether it's just because of like the kind of space that TikTok has held in our culture because it has been that first app that kind of did this and maybe that's just like its habit where everyone is. I don't expect that TikTok will die overnight. Yeah, I mean, I think just the real question is, will you see some of those other competitors kind of start to take over? And I think like the thing about social media platforms like TikTok, because it's not as conventional as like, following friends and really staying in touch with them, but more just like stuff that they show you. There is a real like network effect. Like, if people are only on one platform, then other people join that. Whereas if people like leave a platform, like you've kind of seen with X, formerly Twitter, like all of a sudden, like it starts slowly, people don't want to leave, but then you notice like more and more people hollow out and it kind of speeds up. So, I mean, like, the health of a platform, like something like TikTok, even if you got rid of all the American users completely, say like the ban actually knocked them all off, wouldn't kill it overnight. And also like the TikTok algorithm, I'm pretty sure, at least in Australia, it biases towards like showing us like the content from the country you're from automatically, I think, because, I mean, so this is just total speculation, purely because like I assume that like people tend to like content from where they're from that matches their context. But, without the US, they have such a place in it, so many users, such an impact that it would affect the platform overall.
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of US content creators on my feed. So I'm going to be really interested to see what happens when we get to the 19th of January. And yeah, if anything's going to change, it will go ahead. But Cam, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me, Helen.
Cam Wilson there. And it'll be interesting to see if Trump stops this ban and if our TikTok pages will go a bit dry. That's it for this episode of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow with another episode at 6 a.m. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.